Karen, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Jason. I'm so glad we were able to connect and do this. I've been looking forward to it. So thank you for having me.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this all summer long. This is being recorded in early September for those listening whenever. And we waited most of the summer to get this done. So it's very exciting. So, for those people who are not too familiar with you, give
Hmm.
everybody a little bit of an idea about kind of your background, but kind of
Absolutely.
your path to where you are today and kind of how you got to this point.
Absolutely. So the high level of that from an educational point of view is that I obtained my graduate degree in law. So I have attended law school and graduated therefrom. I have combined that education with specific training for divorce finances. So I'm a certified divorce financial analyst. And so my background has included wonderful legal assignments in both Northern and Southern California on the trial side, in a lot of areas of the law, and also in family law as well. And on the financial side, I have held positions as a CFO and lead financial person for small businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so all of that intel has been combined into a practice that I love. My business is Divorce Financial Strategist, and I'm focused on helping families come through all of the allocations and decisions and planning that has to be made with with finances in divorce. And I'm the proud mother of a now 26-year-old graduate of Northwestern. So go Cats, any of you from the
Woo.
Midwest listening to this. So she's a McCormick engineering grad and currently has her own marketing business running it out of North Carolina. So I had to pitch my girl.
There you go.
So
No, of course.
that's kind of my background. And personally, I love to cook, love to travel, and love spending time with friends and family. So there you go.
So, Karen, I have to ask you, just out of curiosity, as a fellow legal graduate, you never practiced law, correct?
I am not licensed to practice law and do not practice. That is correct.
So, when you went to law school, did you want to go just for the education, or did you at some point have an intention on practicing and then just switch gears?
I had, as we all do when we're young, I had a intention to sort of move forward through the practice. I had a lot of interesting mentors who were judges on the bench in Southern California. And so that had an appeal to me. And so I think in law school, I was originally looking at that. And then our family kind of went through kind of a series of challenges. And I felt that that was not a career path that I could really achieve at that time. And so I decided to just make a switch, if you will. I don't know that it's necessarily a switch, but it's more of a transition and sort of transition and get my experience. And then sort of circle back, if you will, to an area that means a lot to me because this is an area that is so stressful for families. And so I wanted to make sure that I was able to have the training I needed. So as a fellow person of the law, this education is valuable, not from an advice point of view, but just simply from a knowledge point of view, and being able to give my clients a window into what they can expect. And then, of course, sending them to the appropriate professional to get that legal strategy done.
Yeah, you and I are, I think, similar in that way where, we both went and obtained our legal education. I did end up practicing. I became a divorce attorney for a period of time. I
Right. We
then
talked about that.
realized that wasn't working for me, but I wanted to still help in that space and circled back. And that's how I got into coaching. And you kind of circled and pivoted and went into divorce finance. And yet, here we are still helping people. And like you said, knowledge really, I hate to be so cliche, but on the East Coast here, it's late in the day. So I become more cliche as it gets later. But
Your
knowledge is
your
power.
excuse. Your excuse.
Knowledge really is power when it comes to divorce and people
Right.
going through it. And so I think you and I are both, about empowering people with that
Yes.
knowledge as best we can. And, so they can make the best decisions, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the longer you do it, and I think you and I have been in this area for quite some time. I've been in my practice for a little over 12 years now. The longer you do it, the more you see the importance of it, and the importance of being there for people at this time and really giving them that guidance and that pathway that will have both individuals, we hope, leading the next iteration of their life in a as solid a way as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about you and what
Mhm.
you do and how you help with some specific examples. Um, where do you usually come into the picture when people are getting divorced, at the beginning, middle, or end of the process?
So my practice is developed organically, and so I have about a few answers to that question, few short answers to that question.
No, go for it.
So I am either sought by clients directly themselves or brought in by family law attorneys who may be mediators or litigators and the like to begin working with clients to get those that just to get started. So I'm brought in at the very beginning. In California, as we have in other states, there are initial financial documents that the parties need to fill out, and every state calls them by a different name, but it's the same thing.
Right.
It's basically the disclosures. So I'm usually brought in to start there, and then my work continues as I continue to have documentation to determine what the financial assets are for the family. So that whatever's in that bucket, I handle that. Whether that's spousal support, child support, whether that is employee benefits in the form of employee stock options, RSUs, stocks themselves. I handle the separate and community property interest if that's showing up in the family's finances. In the real estate, if someone's bought a property before marriage, but that property has, followed that person into marriage, and there may have been some marital contributions to that separate property. We need to kind of get that straight. We're working with a number of things, retirement assets and the like, to just make sure that that's handled. So that's one way that I come in. Another way that I come in is sometimes closer to the end when folk are needing, maybe there's some challenge on the alimony slash spousal support conversation. So I'm brought in to do what's either called a lifestyle analysis or a marital standard of living analysis in order
Right.
to determine, the base. So you're familiar with that, so you know what I'm speaking of there, right?
Yeah,
Um,
but a lot of people listening are not. So feel free to
Let
talk
me
to me.
explain that. So for if you're in a situation where one or the other party is going to be receiving some sort of support for some period of time, and this is, I'm not talking about child support now, I'm talking about literally alimony spousal support, right? In some cases, either there's temporary support that a person is receiving, so that means that the other party is voluntarily providing that, or it is court ordered. Some of you listening to this may be saying, hey, I'm not getting anything. Okay, so that's another category. Um, but what we want to do when the discussion gets to that point, and it gets to that point closer to the end, when we're trying to decide exactly how much money should the receiving party be getting, the way that we figure that out is performing a marital standard of living report. What does that mean? That means that a professional like myself is going back 3 to 5 years, taking a deep dive into the family's finances. I'm looking at tax returns, I'm looking at income and expenses, I'm looking at how you lived. And I'm coming up with a number that is a baseline so that, one side saying one thing, another side saying another thing. My number is the baseline that we're going to be looking at in terms of determining what that spousal support number is going to be going forward post divorce. So I get involved in that. And finally, the third area, because you asked me when I'm brought in, the third area is, for lack of a better term, I'm calling it boutique work. I was brought in to, determine the value of lost funds in a 401k when one spouse literally just took all the money out, took it out, gone. So
That
they
never
want to
happens.
know, yeah, it sort of happened. Money sort of disappeared. So I'm an expert witness at trial on that at the end of October, providing that situation. I've been brought in to deal with breach of fiduciary duty situations, just really different and really unique situations. I have a current client in the winery business, and I'm kind of doing a flip on the lifestyle analysis. I'm actually paying it forward. So I'm doing a forward facing report, not a back looking report
Okay.
um, for that family so that they can begin to make some decisions on how they want to move forward. And so I, tend to get those. So that's kind of the last category of
So
things
yeah,
that I'm
that
on.
is really niche work there. So do you do kind of like forensic accounting type of stuff?
I would call it light forensic accounting. As I say to people, one of the things that you want to look at is that if there is evidence that there is a lot of money movement coming in and out, or maybe non-disclosure of large amounts of money, then you're going to want to think about bringing in that CPA/forensic accountant. That's going to be a pretty strong expenditure for you.
Right.
So you're going to have to do the ROI on what you think is missing. And a lot of times this comes up in areas where there's been adultery, people stepping out on the marriage, money being spent in other areas, and people wanting to find out how much marital resources actually walked away, right? So you want to, when you're looking at the forensic situation, I encourage clients to look at the ROI. How much are you thinking is at stake compared to how much you're going to have to pay to get it fixed? And if that's working, then that's the professional that you need to be hiring for that, right? So for myself, I can do evaluations of consulting businesses and service related business in order to find income available for support. I can do that sort of thing. But when it levels up, as I just said, to issues that are a little bit more complicated, there is a consideration of bringing in that CPA forensic to kind of jump in there and let you know where all that is standing.
Gotcha. I'm so glad you made that distinction. Now, you also talked about at the beginning, the first way that you're brought in to the fold is when both sides, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said both sides kind of bring you in to do an analysis. Now, so in those situations, are you working for both sides, or do you work for one spouse?
Yeah, so I was speaking of being brought in as the financial neutral on the marital standard of living or the lifestyle analysis. Generally, I'm hired as what we call a joint neutral. So basically, both parties are retaining me to do this work. There have been times when one or the other party has hired me, where I've worked for one or the other party. And in that situation, each party is having their own marital standard of living analysis done. And then the reports come together and we see, where they cross and where they combine. But the most common way that I'm brought in is as a joint neutral. So both individuals are hiring me to do this work.
And are they hiring you themselves, or are you being appointed by the court?
I have not been court appointed to this date, so the clients are directly retaining with me for those services to be provided. So they're each signing my retainer agreement.
And I think that's a great way to approach differences of opinion in a divorce situation.
Absolutely.
Hiring a joint expert like yourself versus each side paying the expense for their own expert. And then you can anticipate, I think, pretty commonly that those reports are going to differ,
Sure.
sometimes greatly. And then you're kind of left where you started. And then at that point, a court might order a court appointed person to do their own
so now
report.
There's a third person, right?
And so you're paying for that.
Right.
And then that report is what usually governs. And so you wasted your money with your separate report. So I like it when people can at least find that commonality that let's just hire one person. They're going to be a neutral. And it is what it is, what the report, we will abide it as long as it makes sense.
There was an interesting situation where, so the two things were going on. I was hired by one of the parties to actually critique the report that was done. So they hired a joint neutral. So this is when it falls into that third category, right? So they hired a joint neutral. The report was done. One of the parties was like, this is missing so much stuff. Okay, I'm not happy. So his attorney sought me out. And so I had to come in and review that report. And then I had to produce my own report. Okay. So that was an interesting engagement because I was critiquing another person's work. And then I had to come in and do my own work. That case settled, as we say, on the steps of the courthouse. So I was scheduled to appear at trial and ended up not having to do so. But that was a case where I did a sort of an interesting approach to it. But yeah.
And Karen, not to go down a rabbit hole on this one, but I'm curious, just as a curious divorce coach, when you did your own report and came to your own conclusions, did it differ greatly from the original report?
I would say it did not because there was anything wrong with that person's professionalism. But to that partner's point, to that individual's point, there were things left out, and then things were looked at in a little different way, right? And so that then did skew my results. And so those results were not conversant with the other report.
Right. Gotcha. So let's talk about, from your experience, what are the big ticket items that people going through a divorce deal with financially,
Oh,
that you
I
help with.
got you. I
You got
got you. Okay. Real estate, retirement, and support.
those are big threes. Yeah.
Those are big threes. And there's a lot
Let's
of,
talk about each one. Real estate.
okay. So let's talk about real estate. So if you're living on the West Coast where I do, I don't think we even need to talk about it. If you're living on either coast, I don't think we need to talk about it. But real estate is usually huge for a client. That's where a lot of their equity is.
Yep.
Sometimes families own more than one piece of property. Sometimes there's family owned property, a lot of stuff going on. But the real estate is huge. And how we're dealing with that is a whole thing, as you know from your coaching. There's a lot of emotionality attached to real estate in terms of who's staying, who's going, are we selling? So I'm working through all the options with my families. I don't just say, hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm like, we go through each one of the options to see which one actually is going to work best for that family. Because all of my work with my client families is unique. I don't have a bullet. I don't have a blueprint that applies to everybody. So I'm looking at family A and I'm going, what works for the real estate? So that's big bucket number one. Second big bucket. Um, for our what we call midlife divorces, anywhere between 45, 65, 70. A lot of money's been put into retirement accounts. A lot of planning's been done around retirement. So some of those accounts have high value points. And now with the divorce, of course, there's going to be a division of those.
Right.
And there's an issue about how can we earn that money back? Is there time to earn that money back? What is that going to look like? Are we going to offset it? There's a lot of retirement account discussions in turn, and also in addition to the traditional, let's just divide the retirement accounts. There's a lot of other discussions that kind of go with that, depending on how many assets or the family has. All right, we touched a little bit on it with the marital standard of living, but the issue of support, huge, huge. If you have
Yeah.
a spouse that's been out of the workforce for a while, voluntarily or through agreement, in the marriage, their skill sets or legacy, depending on how old they are, how long it's going to take for them to ramp up. How long is support going to be awarded for? Okay, what is that person really looking at? The closer a family is to quote unquote traditional retirement age, the more we're looking at least case law in the jurisdiction where I practice. There is case law sort of on this. The closer you get to retirement, how are we dealing with support? So those are really the big buckets. And since you brought it up, I will say that I serve clients in my home state of California, but nationwide for the work that I do. And one of the things that I require from my out-of-state clients is that they have someone like yourself who can lead them to counsel in the area, because we walk alongside that person with the work we're doing so that we're conversant with statutory and case law. There's no need of us coming to some decisions about assets and it cannot be enforced in the jurisdiction where they're living
Right.
and where the divorce is going to be processed. What is the point in that? So for my out-of-state clients outside the state of California, that is my business practice to make sure that they have that that professional in place.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you that, but you just went right into it, and that's great. So you do work with people outside of California. Now, in addition to, let's say you work with somebody in New Jersey.
Okay.
I'm in New Jersey.
Okay.
Let's say they're working with me. And
Yeah.
I help them find an
Yay.
attorney. Yeah, right. This is a good deal already.
I'm liking this story already. All right, this is good. Okay.
And then I help them get an attorney, as I do as a coach often,
Right.
here in New Jersey.
Mhm.
And that attorney is in communication then with you, correct?
That is
Um,
correct.
and do you require, because I would, is that good enough for you? The attorney can kind of counsel you on the state specific statutes, whether it's regarding alimony or
Well, one of the things, the first thing I do in situations, whether it's here or outside of here, is when counsel is involved, I ask for that introduction. In your case, you would provide that introduction if I'm
yeah,
working with you. But yeah, we would have that conversation because, for example, New Jersey is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. So I'd want to know statutorily what is New Jersey doing, and I'm sure that the attorney would just volunteer that. But we would have those discussions. I would be asking some key questions on some asset classes to make sure that I'm, in the right headspace, and I'm looking at this the right way. So definitely, we would be having those conversations.
yeah. And then once you are clear on kind of the state specific procedures and the law, then it's just numbers, right? Then you do what you do.
Then I do what I do.
Yeah.
And I keep their attorney in the loop as we're coming through decisions that we're making. And however the attorney wants to see my work product, I'm happy to produce it. If they want to see some reports, if they want to see maybe a draft settlement agreement, however they want me to deal with it, I fold into whatever their practice priorities are and what they want to see from me. I provide that. And so that's how we work.
Yeah, I love it. So time flies when you're having fun.
Right.
So we're about to wrap up, but before we do, I figured I love ending my podcast with this question. So I'm gonna do it with you.
All right.
What would be your biggest tip or tips, you choose, that you think people need to heed when going through a divorce from a financial point of view, of course?
Okay, I think the biggest tip, and this is probably the hardest one to do, but I'm still going to put it out there. Whether you're on the receiving end of this movement or you're actually filing, one of the things that you want to think about is the other person, and also who do you need? What is it that you really need? You know, before you start, and as a coach, you know this, to really sort of think through your situation, think through your priorities. What is going to be important now that this conversation is on deck? What's important to you? A lot of people don't inner focus. They're reactionary, but they don't inner focus. As a coach, you understand this. So one of the tips that I would say is please take that time, please take the time to do that introspection. I know it's an emotional space and in some cases a shocking space, so we're kind of riveting, but take that space to do that. And then secondarily, my second tip very quickly as we close is make sure that you know where all your financial documents are, whether they're cloud-based or paper-based. Make sure that you're getting all that information together, because I'm going to need it, your attorney's going to need it, your coach is going to need it, everybody's going to need it to be able to help you. So look within and take care of your paperwork. Those are two things I would say.
You know, if I had scripted this and provided you with the answers that I wanted, which by the way, I did not, right? I did not.
He's making that point, y'all. He did not.
I did not, right? But you agree, I didn't do it. But this is not scripted at all. Those would be the best answers that I could come up with, because I preach that all the time. You know, you got to do the work internally, right? To just get through this process and move on from an emotional standpoint, and during the process, and organization is key. And that goes back to preparation. You know, the earlier you can prep and get those documents while you have access to them,
exactly,
you know, is so important. And everybody you work with, all the professionals you work with, will love you to death because you're so organized. And when they ask for something, you can give it to them right away.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love it, Karen. That is gold. You just made my day. So let everybody know where they can find you and learn more about you.
Absolutely. So the name of my business is Divorce Financial Strategist. You can reach me by phone at my office at area code 650. The number is 201-6311. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. And my email is cdfa at Divorce Financial Strategist with an S at the end, it's plural.com.
And all that information will also be in the show notes. So if you're in the car or at the gym working out, don't worry about it. You will find it there. Karen, thanks so much. You were a great guest. We dropped a lot of knowledge, and I think everybody will be very appreciative, and hopefully they enjoyed this interview as much as I did. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again, Jason.